where we dive into the NCAA men's March Madness tournament. Ladies and boys and girls, children of all ages, of course, today is the start of the tournament. I am your host, your executive producer, your founder of Brandon's World, Brandon Lewis. We are in collaboration with the one, the only Voltage Live, with my social media links down in the description below. And you guys know the deal. I do one bracket every year. I do it live here on Brandon's World. This year, I'm doing it the Monday after the bracket has been released. Now, I do have a paper bracket right here in front of me that I am going to be copying exactly. So I have a digital version and I have a paper bracket, but the bracket is going to be the same. I'm not a 10 bracket guy. I'm a one bracket guy. I do my best edge and occasional guesses. I do a lot of research on the tournament a couple of weeks out. You guys know I had on Brandon Wirador on Tuesday. We talked a little about the tournament and the partnership that we have with an organization when it comes to March Madness in the Cleveland area. So go check that out. This year, there are a ton of SEC teams. There are a ton of Big 12 teams. There are a ton of Big East teams. There's a ton of Big 10 teams. And in my opinion, the Western side of this bracket may be the toughest and deepest bracket that we have ever seen. And this year's all about guys like John Calipari, obviously coaching at Arkansas, Rick Pitino at St. John's. You got Bill Self in Kansas. You have obviously the number one overall pick in the NBA draft, I should say, Cooper Flagg, who is projected to be healthy and play in this tournament after that ankle scare uh excuse me in the ACC tournament. So, without further ado, I'm not going to waste any time here. Let's dive into this first game. We're going to do the South region first. I apologize if on audio this may be a little bit tough to follow. Go to the Brandon's World YouTube channel, and that will be linked in the description below. You'll be able to see my full bracket be played out on video. We're going to start with Auburn here. I think that they will defeat uh, either Alabama State or South France, Pennsylvania. I like Auburn to advance. Now, Louisville against Creighton. I gotta tell you, I really like this Creighton team in my opinion. They're long, they're deep, they can shoot, they got switchable wings. I like Creighton here to upset Louisville and play Auburn in the round of 32. Now, Michigan against UC San Diego. I think Michigan is criminally underrated. They won the Big Ten tournament. They have two centers at 6'11, 7'1. They're a really long, lengthy team. And while they're not the best scoring team in the country, and the Big Ten was down this year, I think Michigan's length, their ability to switch, their ability to block the lane will be a handle for a lot of teams. Typically, obviously, the 12-5 is a big upset spot. I like Michigan there, and I think they will take on Texas A&M, who will beat Yale. I think Yale could pull off the upset. I just think they got a bad draw against a Texas A&M team that is a very balanced team. Again, they went through the gauntlet of the SEC this year. So, in that scenario there, I do like Michigan against Texas A&M. Let's move down here to Ole Miss against either San Diego State, who obviously went on that run a couple years ago to the Final Four, or North Carolina, who did not beat anybody. They were obviously the most controversial team I would say to be in this NCAA tournament. They only beat one team that was in the tournament, and that was American, who's a 16 seed. They have not been a very good team all year, but they got hot. And they are, in my opinion, going to advance. It's my one upset to me. I think either San Diego State or North Carolina advance over Ole Miss, and I think that they will take on Iowa State, who will defeat Lipscomb, who is really, they have a dynamic backcourt. They got a 1-2 punch, but they don't have a ton of scoring. Marquette against New Mexico. I think Marquette's a very balanced team, and uh, Michigan State with Tom Izzo. This is one of Michigan State's most balanced teams in the country in recent memory. So I like Marquette going up against Michigan State. And then that's a very tough matchup there with Marquette and Michigan State. I was back and forth on it, back and forth. I think in the end, I think this is going to be a chalk year in the tournament. I think Michigan State is a very physical team. I like them to beat Marquette. I do like Iowa State, though, to take out either San Diego State or North Carolina. So that leads us with a Sweet 16 matchup then of Iowa State, Michigan State. On the other side, then, again, Creighton, I think could potentially give Auburn some issues, but I think Auburn, they are the number one ranked team in the country for a reason. They're so balanced, they're so lengthy, they're so good defensively. I do think Auburn advances, and I do think that they will take on that size in Michigan in the Elite Eight. And I think this is where Auburn's story ends. So I have the number five seed Michigan, who again I think is criminally underrated. I think that they will get into the Elite Eight. I think that they will play Iowa State, and I think that they will beat Iowa State. So my representative for the Final Four out of the South region is the Michigan Wolverines. Again, I think they were criminally underrated throughout this entire year. I think they should be a two or a three seed. I really think they're right up there with Michigan State. I think Iowa State gives Michigan State all they can handle. Michigan State has a lot of transfers. They need to sort of rebuild their roster and reload. So I do have Michigan coming out of the South bracket. So who will they face? Let's go to the West bracket where Florida they're gonna take care of Norfolk State pretty easily. Oklahoma, they've been good this year in the Big 12. They've been sort of hanging around in there. But UConn, who is not as good as in years past, but in my opinion, Dan Early and crew, they will at least get one victory in this tournament. They will knock out Oklahoma. Memphis is always a team where the last couple of years they've been a lower seed, like a 9, 10 seed. This year they're a 5 seed. They got a lot of homegrown talent there. I like them to take on Maryland, who I think will knock off Grand Canyon. Okay. And then from there, as I'm looking at my bracket, actually, I apologize. I knew I made one mistake. I actually have Grand Canyon here knocking off. Yes, I have Grand Canyon knocking off Maryland. That's just a gut punch there. I'm going to roll with it. I also like Drake to upset Missouri. Missouri struggled even in the SEC this year. Not a great sign for them. I think Drake will take on Texas Tech. Texas Tech will knock off UNC Wellington to get there. And I think that we are going to get the St. John's with Rick Pitino against the John Calipari Arkansas, the 10-2. Listen, I think Arkansas is a lot better than its N seed myself, but I think that is the matchup we get. At that point, then I will take St. John's. I will have them go on to face Texas Tech in the Sweet 16. I think Drake's Cinderella story there kind of ends. You listen, Florida's good. I think the championship experience of UConn comes through. I think UConn will take on Memphis. That is a 5 versus 8 matchup in the Sweet 16. I think UConn advances, and if you want to call it a Cinderella story, go ahead. But I think number 8 UConn will advance to the Elite Eight, where they will take on number 2 St. John's. And I just think this Rick Pitino team, this St. John's team, they fly all over the floor. They have versatility. They really have it all. I like St. John's to advance out of the West as a number 2 seed. So I have 5 Michigan against number 2 St. John's on one side of the bracket in the Final Four. Let's go then to the east side where Duke is just so loaded even without Cooper Flag potentially in this first round game, I think they can win. Mississippi State, they struggled a lot this year. Baylor has come out as of late. They were projected to be 11 or 12 seed. They really played well in that Big 12 tournament. I like Baylor to advance against Mississippi State. As much as I like Liberty here for potential upset, I like Oregon here. I think they're a very well-rounded team. And Akron, who I know almost lost in the MAC tournament to Miami of Ohio, but they only have one loss in conference play all season long. Arizona is not a great shooting team. I like Akron here to upset Oregon. I'll take BYU over VCU in the battle of three-letter U teams here. And I think Wisconsin is one of just big, tough, physical. They're always a thoroughbred in this tournament. I like Wisconsin to advance against Montana. I think Vanderbilt is one hell of a story. We know what they did with the football program this year in the NIL. They're doing the same thing in basketball. I think they knock out St. Mary's. And after Alabama knocks off Robert Morris, I actually have Vanderbilt here knocking off Alabama, who just like the year that they had Brandon Miller, I don't trust Alabama. You know my rule here. Generally in college is it's like if you're either a football school or a basketball school. Alabama's just been known for basketball the last few years. I like Vanderbilt to take on Wisconsin, and I will have Wisconsin then advance to the Elite Eight. Who will they play? Well, I think Akron Cinderella story ends in the round of 32. I got Oregon advancing. I will have them take on Duke, and this will be a very good Sweet 16 matchup between Duke and Oregon. But in the end, I think Duke's shooting and probably Cooper Flag being back in this game will be too much to overcome. Two thoroughbreds in the tournament there in the Elite Eight. Number one, Duke. Number three, Wisconsin. Again, I don't think Wisconsin has the shooting to keep up with Duke. So my number one seed out of the Eastern Conference, Duke, will advance to the Final Four. The Midwest, you've got Houston. I think they will advance against St. Edwardville. Gonzaga, Georgia. We know Gonzaga with Mark Few. We know their pedigree and what they have in the NCAA tournament. Georgia is a very good team, man. They own their own. They took teams like Alabama and they took teams like Texas A&M and teams like Florida down to the wire. I really like what Georgia's done, but I think they got a bad draw here. I like Gonzaga. Now, Clemson McNeese is a very interesting 5 versus 12 matchup that's very tight. It's going to go down to the wire. I'm going to take McNeese in an upset. Just a prime 5-12 upset. Very close. I was very close to picking High Point over Purdue, but I don't want to go with too many upsets. It does kind of feel like a chalk year. I'll take Purdue there. Oh, I will take Illinois against either Texas or Xavier. I'll take Kentucky over Troy. Kentucky, even without Calipari, they have rebuilt their roster completely. There is not one person on the Kentucky roster that was on their roster a year ago. To me, that speaks volume to the recruiting that program has done. And then I will take UCLA over Utah State and Tennessee over Wolford. That leads us to UCLA against Tennessee. And again, Tennessee's one of those teams in the SEC that have played well all year long. They will match up against Kentucky in one of the best Sweet 16 matchups. I just think Kentucky's pedigree, even again without Calipari there, I trust the brand more in that spot. I think that they will um, and you can see I have Kentucky entering there in one spot in the Elite Eight. I'll have Purdue entering the other spot in the Elite Eight. Houston Gonzaga is a really tough matchup. I think Houston's just been the better team all year long. Gonzaga would be a nice story, but I have Houston there advancing. And then to take on Kentucky in the Elite Eight, Purdue, I don't think is good enough to overcome Houston and their dominance. I have Houston, Kentucky there in the Elite Eight. So my elite matchups on this side of the board, right? UConn, St. John's, down there in the West, and then Houston, Kentucky in the Midwest. Those are great matchups. I do think in the end, Houston wins. And now my final four is, in my opinion, 5 versus 2 Michigan against St. John's, and the two one seeds on the East and Midwest side of Duke and Houston. Michigan's Cinderella story run ends here. St. John's goes to the finals with Rick Pitino. They take on a loaded Duke squad, and I don't think anybody is stopping the Duke Blue Devils this year. Cooper Flag or not Cooper Flag, they have three top 20 picks in the draft. They have 3 5 stars, another 4 star, a lot of 3 stars. This team is the deepest team in college basketball, bar none. So I do think this again, like the West, right? You got Florida, you got UConn, you got Memphis, you got Maryland. You even have Drake, who's a very good defensive minded team. Arkansas, St. John's. In the Midwest, you got Kentucky, you got Tennessee, you got Houston. In the East, obviously, I think Duke, I think Wisconsin's a viable threat there. And then in the South, Michigan State, Iowa State, Michigan, Creighton, Auburn. It's a very heavy brand based men's college basketball men's tournament this year. I think it's more brand based than skill based. I think it's more coaches based. Outside of Cooper Flag, there's not a ton of top 10-ish talent. Baylor's got some guys. Oregon's got a guy. But this is really about brand base and about coaching base. So, one more time, my final four is out of the South region, I have the number 5 seed in Michigan. Out of the West region, I have number 2 St. John's. Out of the East region, I have number 1 Duke. And out of the Midwest region, I have number 1 Houston. I have St. John knocking off Michigan to get to the championship. I have Duke knocking off Houston to get to the championship, which means Duke against Rick Pitino's St. John's in the championship game. I think Cooper Flag and company are just too much. I like Duke to win the championship. Let me know. Do you guys do digital version only? Do you do print version only? What do you do for March Madness, and how much do you follow the tournament? And are you one of those guys that don't know anything about college basketball? Yeah, you get everything right about the tournament every year because that's what seems to happen.
Like that clip from the Brands World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brands World podcast right here on YouTube.